I'm probably one of the very few persons still around from the very early days. However, even prior to the Federation, there was a European working group set up by Dr. Köpp within his own association called the Verein Naturschutzpark Lüneburger Heide, because Köpp always had a vision of getting Europe together, particularly with conservationists on both sides of the East and the West Bloc. Later on, it grew and included, for instance, Yugoslavia, with the Plitvice National Park as one of the first reserves included into the family of reserves in Europe. Now, Köpp's idea was, in the beginning, to get, as I said, the two blocks together. He used the European Bulletin, to which I became editor for many years, as a so-called bridge amongst conservationists on both sides of the Iron Curtain at that time. Nowadays, conservation responsibilities even goes much beyond the European level. It goes to the global sphere. The nature parks, which were established to serve people for recreational purposes too, not only for keeping biodiversity, but to have the cultural landscapes. They are the guardians for smaller and larger special places in national states and on the international level. The loss of biodiversity is alarming, and there have to be some tools to work against it. And the contribution which parks and reserves within the Federation and other institutes can do is enormous. It's becoming, in the future, I understand, much more important than it used to be in the past. Well, I didn't know 50 years ago it would still be there, but as it is, I'm convinced nowadays at its 50th birthday that it still will be there in another 50 years, and I will not be there at its 100th birthday, but if I would, I think I would be convinced it was worthwhile. In the beginning, it was sometimes very difficult, not between the so-called Western and independent countries, but getting links with the Eastern countries. I am happy to say that former East Germany managed to set aside national parks shortly before reunification, because due to the various conflicts existing on pieces of land set aside for conservation purposes, it would be nowadays much more difficult. This is one major fear of I have that in the future it will become more difficult to set aside new reserves. But the existing ones are thus even more important, and they have to be managed and kept for mankind, if I may say so, on the whole, as they are. And we must not give up at the Federation's task as one of the institutions available nowadays is, I think, you cannot even pay money for that. This is so important, and it cannot be replaced by something else. One thing compared with the beginning was we really considered as the Federation at that time as having been a sort of family of friends, of responsible people knowing each other, as I said before, and we should continue to keep this link, and the Federation is a wonderful tool to be able to do so. I personally miss remembering the early years. We were really a close family with friends. This is a bit more difficult with your number of new members you have since. But to a certain extent, and if one really tries hard, I think it can still be done. You should know that you are not only one organization, but you are the organization, mother and father together, for parks and reserves. And you have for society a big responsibility for the future. And I do really see this as one of the major objectives, that you are not doing something for yourself, you're not working for EUROPARCs exclusively, but you're working for people. And this is important, people that do count. A unique international organization, having grown from a small circle of friends to a well-established and internationally recognized federation responsible for parks and reserves, being important pieces in all nations. A small wish, and this is there should be a growing importance for international parks and reserves, those who are crossing national borders, and be taken as unique pieces of the landscape, whether they are one or the other country, doesn't matter. This is a small wish, and the bigger wish is that parks and reserves and the people working in them will be and feel their responsibility they have for society. And they could be used as examples of how to manage and to use our landscape and countryside for future generations.